Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Roy Wood, and I'm the Chief of Interpretation at Shenandoah National Park in Virginia. You might be wondering why I'm on the Explore.org Brown Bear Chat, and if you've only tuned in for the last year or so, that's a very good question. But I was at Katmai National Park and Brooks Camp when the bear cams started up. What was that now? 2013, so 4 years ago? I think 4 years ago that we started this. Or maybe, no, it was in 12. So it's 5 years now that we've been doing the cams. So I was there when it started and used to spend a lot of time on the cams and in the chat areas talking to people about the Brooks Camp bears, about bear biology in general, and about other things that were Brooks Camp related. But in spring of 2016, I moved to Shenandoah National Park in Virginia, where I am currently the Chief of Interpretation and Education there. So a lot of it's the same kind of bureaucratic responsibilities, hiring the staff, supervising the staff, setting the long-term goals for the park, but without brown bears, without the ability to get out and interact with everybody. And it's something I've really missed. I enjoyed being involved with the early days of setting up the cams at Brooks Camp. I mean, it was exciting setting up the technology, but it was even so much cooler to be there as the whole community started to develop and build. And that is probably the thing that I'm most proud of my time there at Katmai, was being a part of the early days of the Brooks Camp phenomenon with the cams. We started small, if you will, and it rapidly grew, and then the community came along, and now there's something like 60 million views a year of the web pages and 7 or 8 million views of the ranger programs. So it's a pretty cool thing. And I was really excited last week when Explore.org asked me if I wanted to come on and talk about my feelings about the webcams, and maybe have an opportunity to talk a little bit about the differences and the similarities between brown bears and black bears. Katmai National Park, of course, is known for its large population of large brown bears. Katmai is 4.1 million acres and has somewhere around 2,200 brown bears, and that's a lot. And in the summertime, in July at Brooks Camp, there's maybe 50 to 75 bears packed into about a 1 square mile area, which is pretty concentrated and makes bear viewing very, very easy there and very rewarding. And that's why it's a great place to put the cams in. Shenandoah, on the other hand, where I am right now, is it's black bears only. It's around 200,000 acres, but we have about 600 black bears, 400 to 600 black bears. So density-wise, it's even a higher density than what we had at Katmai, as far as bears per acre or bears per square mile. Of course, we don't have like that one great concentration like we have at Brooks Camp, and so that's one reason why you don't see black bear cams and black bears catching brook trout as they're spawning or moving up and down the stream. There's just really not one good location where we could set up cams or where people could go watch them. But people come to Shenandoah to see black bears, and quite a few people are rewarded by that. And maybe some of the viewers out there right now, I know some of you are local because I've met some of you in the park, but some of you probably have come up to Shenandoah specifically to see bears. We put bears on a lot of our promotional materials, and we talk about them a lot here as well. So that's sort of the background for this, and hopefully I've given enough time for people to sort of check in and get familiar with the layout on the page. I'm not exactly sure where to post questions right now. I know that for the past couple of days you've been able to post them as part of the blog. Hopefully right now there's the normal chat window underneath the video, or off to the side, where you could be posting questions. And so far it looks like there's about 12 questions, and I will do my best. Some of them I've seen already, and I will do my best to try to answer them as much as I can. There are going to be some that unfortunately I just don't know the answer to. Like there were some, if there are any specific ones about bear activities at Brooks Camp this last summer, I probably can't answer those, because despite living, what are we, like 80 miles, something like that, from Washington, D.C., I have no internet at my house. And even at the park, our internet is very slow. It shocks people, but I had better internet connectivity in Bush, Alaska than I do in rural Virginia right now. And that's why I'm out here in what's actually the city greenway of Luray, Virginia. I don't know the exact street address, but if you do a Google search for Luray, Virginia, and look at the greenway just north of town, right where it crosses under Highway 211, I'm right there. 211 is right back here behind me, and this is Hawksbill Creek right on the side. And I came here for two reasons. One, there's a cell phone tower right over there, so I get a pretty good connection to that cell phone tower. The other reason I'm here instead of up in the park is that we have freezing rain up there right now. And I do have the ability to broadcast from a few places in the park, but I didn't want to risk it with freezing rain that I wouldn't make it there, or and have to turn around, or I'd be in an accident or something. So I'm here in the Greenway in Luray, Virginia. Beautiful location. Some of you might be even familiar with this spot. But great cell service here, and hopefully the connection remains intact during the whole broadcast. So as you're watching along, I'm gonna start trying to answer these and work them into the conversation here. If you come up with some questions that you would like to ask, I believe you can post them either on that blog area or by the video, and what they're going to do is they're going to feed them to me on my iPad directly beneath the screen here. And so when you see me looking down, that's what I'm doing, trying to catch up on the questions. And I'll go ahead and I'll jump right in. The first question that's on my list is, do you feel that live cams are going to help the national parks receive more much needed money for care and research? And I think that's a really good question, and a really hopefully a good answer that I can give for it. We weren't sure when at Katmai, when we attempted the first cams. We attempted them before Explore contacted us, and it was kind of a failure. They worked part of the time, but we couldn't support the large numbers of viewers that really wanted to tune in and see the bears. So they were down more than they were up, or you got rejected because we had exceeded the capacity on the site. And so it wasn't a very fulfilling experience for people, and we trashed it. So a couple of years later, when we started up with Explore, again, we weren't really sure how great the phenomenon would be, but it was pretty obvious within a couple of hours of being live that people were interested in this, and a lot of people, really started tuning in to watch this. And there was some concern amongst people in the park at Katmai that this was going to drive up visitation to the park. And if you've been fortunate enough to visit Brooks Camp has about 10,000 visitors a year, and probably can't accommodate many more than that in the month of July. The rest of the summer, there's space in the campground and space at the viewing platforms, but in July it's pretty intense, the competition to get to the falls platform and watch the bears from there. And people were concerned that it would greatly drive up the visitation, and it would affect the experience and affect the bears and their habitat. And but we did it because we felt that the experience that people could gain from watching the bears on the cameras was worth the possible uptick in visitation, because it would begin to open up the Brooks Camp experience and this ability to watch bears to everybody. If you looked at the demographics for people that visit Brooks Camp, it tends to be skewed to retired, wealthy, highly educated people. It doesn't really reflect the population as a whole. And we felt that the ability to broadcast on the cams would sort of even the playing field, that anybody that had access to a computer with an internet connection, which could be something you had at home or something that you just borrowed while you went to the library or to the coffee shop. We felt like if we could do that, it would make it accessible to a lot more people. And really, in national parks, that's what we're trying to do. We love it when people can come visit us, but what we're trying to get folks to do is to make a connection to the place and to the story of that place. And if you show up in the park, we hopefully help you make that connection by having evening programs and ranger guided walks and things like that make you fall in love with the place and hopefully make you want to care for it. And there are many different ways that you can care for a place, but we'll just use that as a basic example. We want you to care for the place so that you will help take care of it. And we felt like the cams would allow people of all ethnicities and age groups and education groups, and without regard to how much money you make, to be able to have a Brooks Camp bear experience. And we believe we've succeeded there, because when we look at the analytics, we see that the people are all over the age groups, though the people that interact with us on these chats tend to be middle age and older. We don't get a lot of like 16-year-olds interacting on these chats with us, but we feel like it really leveled the playing field, and felt like we were really onto something here. And we had the year before I left Katmai, we worked with some researchers from Kansas State University, and some of you maybe took the survey. We were hoping to gauge some of that ability to use the cams and technology to connect people to nature. And if you participated in that survey, thank you very much for doing that. And if you participated in person, thank you very much for doing that too. We know, especially if you only have a few hours in the park, your time is very limited. And they have now published the results of that. And what they believe is that those of you watching on the cameras have at least as strong a connection with Katmai National Park and Brooks Camp and the bears there as the people that visit in person, which is a really rewarding thing for us to discover. We felt like we were onto something, but we needed to wait for the science to come in. And so at least with this one survey and the responses that were received by those of you that submitted them, it looks like that you guys are every bit as likely to support Katmai National Park and bears and conservation in general, obey regulations, to accept restrictions. They asked a whole bunch of things, but you are very supportive of the conservation efforts of the park, and as much as the people that actually make it there. And in fact, we were so pleased with the results of this that Mike Fitz, who many of you know from the chat on Monday, and many of you know from his time at Brooks Camp with me, he and I are supposed to be presenting along with the researcher at a conference next week. And we're crossing our fingers and hoping we can work out a way to simulcast that, so you guys can have another chance to interact with Mike, but also see the results of this. So I know that was a huge, long answer. That was like 8 minutes long talking to that. But so do I feel that that cams like this will lead to much needed money and care for research? I do believe that if parks fully embrace this idea of using cams as a way to let people peer into the way the parks function, the wildlife there, to have this always available connection, I do firmly believe that will help the parks. Whether that turns into money or not, I don't really know. We never really asked for money as part of the cams. We wanted you to tune in, and we wanted you to learn about the place, and I think we've succeeded there. And we did receive donations, and oh my gosh, the donations that came in after that cub died over that 2 or 3 day period on camera back in, what was that, 14? Yeah, it was 15. I've forgotten. I left already, and I've totally got into my Virginia frame of mind. But when the cub died, and we had to watch that painful reaction, many of you donated money to help us research the bears, learn more about their family trees and the health of them overall. And so I think that there's an opportunity for money to come in there, but I believe that what most of us really are hoping for is that people watching this cam or any of the other cams that Explore has will make a really strong connection with that place. And the next time a question arises about, is this place important? Is it important to me? Is it important to my children? That we'll all be willing to step up and speak out for the place. It doesn't always mean money, because not everybody can do that. It could be just voting appropriately, writing letters in support of a park. It could be going and donating. It could be becoming a cam operator. It could be, becoming an employee of the park. So there are lots of ways that people can contribute to the success of the parks. Money is great, but that's not the only way that people can help. So I should move on to the next question, but as you can tell, I get excited about that one. We're going to move on to the next one because at least when I did these at Katmai, Mike and I used to be able to get through about 20 questions, and I am not going to make it if I spend 15 minutes on each one of these. So let me move down to the question number 2 that was on my list. The question is, considering that bears bulk up prior to denning, approximately how much do they gain and approximately how much do they lose returning to and digging a den? So sort of a multi-part question there, and unfortunately I can't give you a rock-solid answer for either species. But we'll start with the brown bears. An adult brown bear, not an incredibly huge one like 747, but sort of a typical brown bear coming out of its den in the spring is going to be relatively lean. I would bet that 747 and Otis, when they come out of their dens this spring, though, they're going to still look very plump and very healthy because of the sheer mass that they put on during hyperphagia this year, that period in which they're eating and eating and eating, and the internal trigger that says, "You're full, dummy, stop eating," that's turned off because they just want to put on fat. They're going to come out, they're going to be relatively thin. And so in the case of an average bear, not one of those big behemoths, it might be 500, 600 pounds, something like that in Katmai. And they might gain another 400 or 500 pounds throughout the summer. A little bit in July, but July's kind of getting them out of the hole that they were in from hibernation and the lean period in the spring before the really fatty food, calorie-dense food becomes available. And then really packing it on in September and in October when the dead and dying salmon are very easy to collect. And that period in the fall is hyperphagia. And a really big bear like 747 and Otis, I didn't see him this year other than on some photos that people shared with me, but I'm gonna say probably in excess of 1,000 pounds, maybe 1,100 or so. And I'm sorry if I am contradicting what Ranger Dave or Leslie or somebody on the camera said this summer. By all means, go with what they said. As I mentioned, I don't have much of an opportunity to watch the cameras because of where I live right now. Black bears in a place like Shenandoah are going to be in the like 200 pound range, 250, maybe 300 for a really, really big bear when they come out of the den. And they may gain, the largest bears may gain 200 to 400 pounds, something like that. They're eating about 20,000 calories a day in order to get to that really fat period, or that fat body weight at the end of the season. The big difference in food sources is impressive, I think, because at Katmai they're eating salmon almost entirely in the fall, and there's a lot of fat and a lot of calories in a salmon. Less so after the fish dies and they start to decompose a little bit, but it's very easy to get and readily available. The black bears here in Shenandoah have to eat acorns, and a typical acorn about that big, and I'm not under an oak tree here right now, I'm underneath a cottonwood tree, but an oak acorn might have 110 calories in it, and they need to eat about 20,000 calories a day. So hey kids, break out your calculator and do the math. I'm not sure what that is, but that's a lot of acorns that they're eating, and a little bit of grass here and a little bit of grass there, and they might find some grapes left on a wild grapevine and eat that. But it's a whole lot of acorns that they're eating, all designed to bulk them up. And then over the course of that hibernation period, which could be some places 6 months, around here it's going to be probably closer to 5 months, 4 months maybe of hibernation. They're going to lose most of that just through normal metabolism. So they'll come back out lean again, and then have a few difficult weeks or a month and a half or so until the food really comes in and they can begin to offset that deficit from hibernation. I thought there was another hibernation one. Let me look real quick here and see if I jump down through that. Well, so let's see. There is, do the black bears hibernate in Shenandoah since it doesn't get socked in with snow like Katmai? Yes, they do, because hibernation in most animals is not a reaction to cold or a reaction to day length or something like that. It's a reaction to the low availability of food. And so the bears living in this area are genetically programmed, if you want to call it that, to expect that about this time of the year The acorns are mostly off of the trees. The chestnuts are mostly off of the trees. The grapes are all shriveled up and essentially gone. The grass is not very nutritious, and they start to know that the food is going to become scarce. And so even last year, where we only had 2 days of very little bits of snow, the bears still, for the most part, went into to their dens and hibernated. And you can find exceptions to that. I know that unfortunately a bear was hit on Highway 211, not too far from the park, back in January. It had been seen for a couple of days around the highway, and it eventually got hit. And I know that there are some bears that are in the lower elevations, like in and around the town of Blue Ray. And I live outside of town, and I live in a forested area, and I do believe that I saw some bear tracks on the road in the winter. But those are bears that have become probably habituated to human food sources, and human food sources could be bird feeders, dog food left unsecure in the backyard, or garage doors left open, or trash left out too long. Places where they can get food that over the course of maybe a generation or two, their mothers have taught them to sort of go counter to their natural tendency to go into the den, because food is readily available. And I know in like Sequoia, Kings Canyon in California, and in Yosemite, there are some bears that don't readily hibernate anymore, probably also because of that. But it really is it's an adaptation to a low food period. It might be initiated and triggered by the days getting shorter, much like when the days get shorter for me now, I start to think of winter food that I want to eat, and I get different activities that I'm looking forward to doing. It might be that the day length is triggering that in me, just like the day length in a bear makes it think, you know what, it's getting a little hard to get food here. Maybe we should think about going into the den and riding this one out again. So let's see, that I do believe was the last of the hibernation question. So let me jump down to number 3 on here, and this is one I can't really answer. I'm so sorry for this. It was somebody asking for an update on some of the favorite bears and how they were doing the last time I saw. And I tuned in a couple of times, mostly when someone would say to me, either Mike or Gene or Dave or Anella or someone from Explore or some of the cam viewers that like Love the Cams and Kat and Jurgen that will send me, like, check this video out, you'll get a kick out of this. And so I remember seeing the unidentified family up on top of Dumpling, and that just warms my heart, because we always talked about how when they did the survey of the denning locations in the 1970s, that a lot of the bears went on top of Dumpling and denned up there. And we saw on the cams a couple of years ago, we saw a distant glimpse of the bear, and then this time to see them playing for however long that was. That was really cool to be able to see that. So, but I can't really give you updates or much in the way of opinions about what I saw on the cam, since I didn't see it. Now I will say this, I was very excited to see Otis back, a little dismayed with his stumbling that one time trying to get up the bank. Somebody sent me that clip, but it was great to see that he's still catching fish and still really fat. However, I must say that I was firmly in Team 747's court, so I was a little disappointed that 747 didn't win, because that was fun to watch him grow up out there. And so I have to put something to rest here. In the Bear ID book, 747, I think it mentions on the wiki page that at some point in the past he had a nickname of Colbert. Well, back before he became so fat and sort of fit the jumbo plane, Boeing 747 wide body jet analogy, like he fits right now because he's so huge. One of the things we noticed about him is that his right ear was a little different than his left ear. It wasn't symmetrical, it sort of stuck out a little bit. And if you watch Stephen Colbert, you will see that his ear also has a little outward, downward it's different from his other ear, and I'm not hurting his feelings, like he even watches this, but I'm not hurting his feelings because he points it out a lot that his ears don't match up, and we thought, yeah, that was kind of appropriate there. That was a way that we remembered him before he was that behemoth that he is today. So if that comes up again and somebody's saying, I think that sounds made up, or where did that come from? That's where it came from. That was a former bear monitor and I, who were big fans of Colbert Report, and we thought that bear's ear, 747's ear, looked a little wonky, like Stephen Colbert's ear does. And then the second part of this question is, when do the assigned numbers and pictures get posted, and approximately when? Well, the Leslie Scora is the bear monitor. She assigns the numbers, and if any nicknames are generated for the year, she's the one that records which nickname goes with it. And since I haven't been there for a while, I don't know what their policy is right now on it, but typically she finalized all of that, or her predecessors finalized all of that over the winter time. They gave us the numbers in the spring so that we could update the Bear ID book. So I would say you're probably not looking at anything being made public until maybe April or May, maybe even a little bit later. But that's something to ask Ranger Dave about at some point if you catch him on the chat. Number 4, I think I can quickly, if there is such a thing for me, answer that one. This is, I had to look this one up because I wasn't sure what they were talking about. But the question is, I heard news of a grizzly bear shot and killed at Basharoff National Preserve or Wildlife Refuge by a guide recently as the bear was going to attack 2 fishermen. So I did a Google search on that last night because this is one of the ones that was available to me to look at last night. And it looks like the only one that I could find occurred in 2016. And it's as they described here. These people were out fishing with a guide. They startled the bear and it charged, and the guide shot it and in self-defense or in protection of the clients. And the question then is, in my opinion, why does Katmai not have this problem, but it occurred in neighboring Basharoff? Basharoff is right next to Katmai. Their office is in King Salmon, just like Katmai's office, and we staff the Interagency Visitor Center there together. Very close. You would think bears would be the same. But one thing that biologists and bear behaviorists tell us is that there are a few ways that you can trigger an attack in bears. You can get between a mother and her cubs, or threaten her cubs, make her feel like you're threatening her cubs. That's one way, and that's the one that I think everybody knows, and it's so widely known that it's one of the I think the coolest Gary Larson cartoons was the guy getting in the elevator between a mother and her cubs, and so it's something everybody has heard of. Don't do that. Another reason is that bears can be very protective of their food, and typically a grizzly bear or a brown bear that doesn't have access to a lot of reliable salmon runs or washed up dead seals or whales or something, their food is scarce and they're going to protect it very well. And then the third really big reason why a bear might attack is that you have surprised them. And we'll talk about those 3 right now. The 4th reason is that the bear attacks because it wants to eat you, and that's extremely rare overall. And if you want to read in a lot of detail about this, there's a book called Bear Attacks, Their Causes and Avoidance by Stephen Herrero, and he breaks it down statistically, every kind of bear attack that we've known. And so if I state something differently than what Stephen Herrero would state, definitely go with Stephen Herrero. He is the guy that has analyzed this in the most scientific way. I mean, as much as you can when you can't stage 100 different bear encounters and see who gets smacked, how many times the bear runs away, and who gets killed. We can't do that. So you have to look at the numbers and try to infer information and behavior by the numbers. But check that book out if you're interested in it. It's been in print for a number of years. I'm not sure what edition it's on right now, and he has consulted at Katmai on a number of occasions. So we'll focus on the first 3 because I think that illustrates this question the best, and why Brooks Camp appears to not have the same problems that other places have. So let's start with the surprising. We are there every year we show up about the same week every year, even before most of the bears are there. We're there almost the entire time that we're there. We stick to the trails. We walk and talk and do pretty much the same thing. Yeah, there are people that are in the rivers, but the rivers, it's kind of predictable. So it's rare for us to truly surprise a bear at Brooks Camp. There are enough of us doing the same thing day in and day out, and have been doing so for dozens of years, that mothers have taught their cubs that behavior of these strange humans walking around. And so we rarely surprise them in the way that a bear gets surprised out in a wildlife refuge in the middle of nowhere. So that's one area where we have habituated them to our presence. The second one that I want to talk about is food. Bears are not social animals. They typically are loners. You find them out on the tundra digging up squirrels or eating berries alone, with the exception of mothers and their dependent young. But at a place like Brooks Camp, if you want to partake in that abundant food supply there in July and in September, you have to make some adjustments as a bear. You have to be willing to accept the very close presence of other bears that are going for the same food source. And so the bears that we see at Brooks Camp are tolerant of one another. And so you could infer from that they have extended that courtesy to us as well, that there's plenty of food there. I don't have to risk injury to myself attacking you every time I see you, because you can eat. I can eat more. There's more fish here than I can eat. There's more fish here than you and I can both eat. So let's not fight. The third reason is mothers and cubs, and surprising them and getting between the mother and their cub. Again, the mothers are there. They get familiar with us. They train their cubs. In fact, sometimes the mothers with cubs have been known to leave their cubs near the bear viewing platforms, because it's probably a little safer place to be, and that we don't get the large male bears as readily in those areas, because they tend to be a little more wary of humans. So those are the reasons why I think that bear behavior-wise, the Brooks doesn't have the same problems. Another thing that I think that Katmai National Park and the folks that manage the people and the bears around Brooks Camp have done a great job of, well before I was there, setting up the policies and the regulations so that we don't walk around with food, dropping it, and we don't leave things on the ground that bears play with. And so we've done, I think, a really good job of, despite the fact that we're living and playing right in that concentrated bear habitat, we're trying to minimize our impact on them by keeping food and other things out of the way. So there was another short answer from me, wasn't it? So we're about at the halfway point, and usually at the halfway point I would introduce myself again. My name is Roy Wood, and I'm currently the Chief of Interpretation and Education at Shenandoah National Park in Virginia. But I did used to work at Katmai. I worked there for 13 years. Much of that time, the summertime, was spent out at Brooks Camp among the bears there. And for the last 4 years of my time, I was working on the Bear Cam project with Explore.org. And I left there in 2016, and have been in Shenandoah since then. But a few days ago, they asked if I would be willing to come on and talk about bears and my experience there, and maybe a little bit about Shenandoah's bears as well. If you have questions you would like to ask, there is somewhere on the web page, there's a link to a page with a blog post. They're accepting questions there, and hopefully also in the same general vicinity as my chat window. But apologize. I can't look at it live and see where it is, and while I love the new design of the web page, I haven't had an opportunity to really get familiar with it. Okay, so now I went out of the way to answer this one because I like props, and so this question was, do I know how bears regenerate their claws? Do they wear down like dog claws, or do they have sheaths that slough off, revealing new sharp claws underneath like cats do? Or is it something completely different? Well, even though we have black bears here, or I shouldn't say even though, we have black bears here, so we have props. And I went and I grabbed our bear awareness props. And in here we have bear poop, and we have, I thought about putting this on because it's cold out here today. We have a bear puppet to keep my hands warm, and we have bits of bear hide. We use these on school programs. I have a rubber bear paw, and we do a lot of rubber things because if kids drop them, they don't make a mess. We can also take these rubber ones and mush it into sand and mud and make imprints of the tracks. I have a skull, but the thing that I was really trying to get to was a claw, because I wanted to be able to answer this question. So this is a black bear claw. Trying to look for the best background for it, because well, let's see, can I get it close enough? That'll work. So that is a black bear claw. Black bear claws are very curved like this, which makes them better climbers of trees. Brown bears can climb trees as well, but the curved claws let them grip the bark better, whereas brown bear claws would be longer and straighter, not quite the curve that you see here. But specifically, the question is, are they more like dog or cat claws? And they are more like a dog's claw, in that they continually grow and they wear down, and on the underside there's a little notch there, which would be like where the quick would be on a dog. You know, when you can cut a dog's claw too short and it bleeds because you get into that fleshy area underneath there, and that's what you've got there. It grows directly out of the bone, which is what this is. And if you ever have the opportunity to touch a bear's paw, it feels very much like a large, albeit rougher, dog pad. They've got the separate toes like a dog has, and then the big flat area, which is kind of small on a dog, but I should pull this one back up. So they got, you know, the individual toes like that, and then they've got this big fleshy area here. You don't always see the heel of the bear. You usually will see just that part, but it feels very much like a dog's. It's rough, it's very callousy, and bears will shed the tough outer callus in the den often, and so when they come out, they have little like pink, very tender toes often, but they toughen up pretty quickly. And I believe that's what gives the bears the ability to grip the edge of the falls at Brooks Camp, because I've been out there, Mike and I have been out there a bunch of times, and it is slippery. It's impressive that they can stay on there. So hopefully that answers that question for that person on the claws. Number 6. Do we have 20 yet? We're at 19. Boy, I'm never going to make it, am I? Number 6, my favorite Brooks bear moment. This one. So I have a couple of moments, but for that I really liked. But the one that I think today that kept coming to the front of my mind was the time that we mounted the rescue to rescue Divot. And the reason I like that one is because it has a happy ending, and a bit of a sucker for the happy endings. But it also, it all came together because of the bear cams, and photos from Calliope that showed Divot with the snare around her neck one day, and a day or so before with no snare around her neck. So there's that was really cool, and the fact that that we were able to go out and tranquilize her and remove the snare and share that information with everybody, because we were recording it in real time. And if you're not sure what I'm talking about, somebody may have already dropped the link into the chat area. But if you do a Google search for Divot, wolf snare, bear, something like that, it shows up, and we have about a 45-minute video that documents that effort to try to rescue this bear that got a wolf snare around her neck. And so I'm incredibly proud of that. It's a bear that we all knew, that grew up around Brooks Camp, and to have it end well. Very quickly though, I love this was before the cams, but I'm so happy about how the Holly and backpack story turned out when he had his broken leg. And of course, then I'm very happy how the 402 cub adult Holly story turned out, and to be there to witness that. Both of those were incredibly inspiring and fun to watch from a scientific standpoint, as well as just rooting for the underdog standpoint. And I wish I had time to to go into the 40-minute explanation for why the divot story was great or why the backpack and holly story was great, but those are the moments that I think that people are going to be sick of hearing about, when I'm 75 years old and in my rocking chair and I keep wanting to tell the stories, because just very proud of the work that was done around the lives of those bears and how we were able to interpret it and share it with all of you on the cam. The next question is one that looks like it's going to require me to understand a lot about what happened this summer. And unfortunately, this one is talking about the large numbers of sows and cubs and subadults and how many bears were fishing the falls into October. Like we would say, every year's a little bit different, and every year we learn something new and exciting. And so I was a little surprised to see that there were as many bears fishing the falls into October, but I think it was about like maybe 2009 or 2010 that we also had a year where there were a lot of fish jumping the falls into October, and I took a bunch of photos. There were some bears out there, but I took a bunch of photos of these red salmon jumping, and I just hadn't seen that very often. So it's a great thing about nature. It's always surprising us with something new that we thought wasn't really possible. I'm going to skip number 8 for a second. What do I miss most about Katmai? Well, of course I miss the bears. I miss the people that I worked with there. There's some really good folks there, really good folks in every national park. I miss the sort of the sense of adventure too. It was fun living out in Bush, Alaska. Of course, the things I don't miss are living in Bush, Alaska. It's exciting and fun, but it's incredibly hard to do. And the simple things in life, you take for granted when you can go by the store and get a box of or a bag of fresh lettuce, on your way home from work. And the folks that live out in Katmai can't get really anything fresh other than salmon. And what they can get is expensive and often of very poor quality in the produce area. So that stuff made it very, very hard to live there. And I would absolutely do it again, and I would probably absolutely stay again for 13 years because it remained fun, at Brooks Camp and around those bears all the way to the very end. And despite many people cycling through the staff out there, it was a time I'll never forget, and I've made friends with people that I keep in touch with regularly. But it was difficult. Somebody was asking me that yesterday, like what do you miss the most? And bears. The bears were a blast. Let's see. Do I miss you all? Yes, of course I do. I wouldn't be on here if I didn't miss you guys. And I hope that some of you. Well, I know that some of you. I hope more of you are interested in tuning into the chats that we've started doing here at Shenandoah. We're starting off very slowly because we're trying to learn how to do it, and it's a different way we're doing it here because we don't have wired internet any place in the park where we can do it. So we're slowly building a cellular network that we can use in different locations to do programs, and we've done 3 or 4 right now, and hopefully you'll follow us on Facebook and tune into those and learn about Shenandoah. It's a small place, but there's so much going on in this park, and one thing that I'm really excited about is that at Katmai there were a total of about 30 employees, and there were only a handful of people in the resources division. So there weren't as many people we could go to talk to about the various aspects of Katmai National Park. Here at Shenandoah, in the summertime, there's something like 400 employees, and we have lots and lots of people in different sciences, and so we can talk about air quality and climate change and salamanders and geology and cultural resources and birds of prey, and we've got a lot of people here that have that area of expertise that we can pull in and do these chats so that it's not always just like it was at Katmai, like me and Mike and I, and the occasional Troy or Leslie or somebody coming in. That I think we can get a lot more voices on the camera here. So hopefully you'll tune in, because I really do miss the times pulling up the chat area and interacting with you guys, and I miss these roughly weekly chats that we would do in the summertime. The other part of that is, have the realities of the bear cam met my vision? Absolutely. I remember the first day when I was talking to Tom from Explore, I would say stuff like, and if we do this, I want to have the ability to have conversations with people. I don't want it to be just the camera pointed at the bears with no interpretation and no interaction. I want the community there. I want the virtual campfire experience. And they said, absolutely, we can do that. So, you know, I couldn't be happier with how things turned out with the relationship with Explore and how the community has built around these cams. Very, very proud of that. Let's see. Have I ever encountered a winter bear? No, I have not. A winter bear would be one that comes out of its den in the winter, like during a warm period, and there are Native American legends about how that's the worst bear to come in contact with in the winter, because they're hungry. Maybe they're grumpy because they got out of bed on the wrong side in the wrong time of the year. I also read at one point something like, and they often are icy, so if you have to fend them off with spears or arrows, that it can be difficult to do. But I have not come across what I would consider a winter bear. I have had them very late in the season, like December or so. It's not late, but a couple of weeks ago, one walked down I was out mowing my front lawn, and one walked down the road, and I just like went and stood on the porch and let him walk by. Not a winter bear though. Number 12 is, have I had any close encounters with any of the black bears here? And I haven't really. I've seen, well, I was going to say I've seen dozens of bears. I don't know if I've seen dozens of bears or 6 bears twice, because I'm not very good at telling black bears apart yet, and maybe I never will be, because I don't see them with the regularity that I saw the brown bears at Brooks Camp. But I have seen a few dozen bears. I've seen family, mother and 3 cubs, mother and 2, mother and 1. I've seen lots of individual bears. I've seen some really big bears. When I say really big, 300-pound black bear, good size, but not Katmai size. Cub adult is probably 300 pounds based on the pictures I saw of him. But nothing that I would consider to be a close counter or anything, really frightening. Shenandoah also hasn't had any human injuries from bears, and that's pretty impressive too, because we get about 1.5 million visitors. We have those 600 bears, and lots of people out hiking. We have had close encounters where people have had to throw rocks, where somebody 2 summers ago had to poke at one with a hiking stick to keep it away, and unfortunately a person hiking with 2 dogs last summer. And it's legal to hike with dogs in Shenandoah. It's one of the cool things about the park, that you can travel through there's only about 20 miles of trails in the park that you can't take a dog on. The rest you can. But unfortunately, she had an interaction with a bear, and it ended up killing one of her small dogs. But I have not experienced anything that was a close encounter or anything that really startled me. I just get all excited when I see a bear. Second time I went driving in the park, I saw a bear. And there's no way for me to share the picture right now, but I took it with my iPhone, so it's a terrible picture. Took it through the windshield of the car, so it's even worse. But there were, and I can't remember, 2 or 3 bears. Two cubs and one mother together, and they were out in the forest, barely visible. And I texted it to everybody I knew from Katmai, and of course they all made fun of it, because the cubs were like this big, little tiny things. And I just assured them that the trees were huge that they were next to, and that's why they looked so small. But I don't think they bought it. But while I was close to them, it wasn't a surprise or dangerous or anything like that. Let me see. Try to get the last couple of Brooks Camp ones. What's my favorite thing about being at Shenandoah? Well, from the way I've talked so far, you'd think it's because of food, and that's not really the case, though. The southern style pulled pork sandwiches are right up there with Cheetos, if you ask me. What I really like about it is it's a different environment. I grew up in Indiana, which has a lot of the same feel. It's humid. A lot of the trees are the same, but it's different enough that it's exciting. And I like learning new resources and addressing new problems that the park may be facing. Either like how to better interpret something and educate people about it. And so that's really exciting as an interpreter, to go into a new place, learn it, and try to share that information with folks. And that's one reason why we're trying to do some version of Shenandoah TV, Ranger TV, something like that here, where we do these regularly scheduled chats where we can talk about the various things that you might find in Shenandoah. So that's really fun. It's there's just a lot of opportunities here. The staff is much larger, so I can work with a lot of different people. So I really like that. I do like having a grocery store close to, though, too. If I must be absolutely honest. What are the differences in bear culture behavior between the black bears of Shenandoah and the browns of Katmai? Well, there's a lot of similarities as far as mothers and cubs and how they eat throughout the year and hibernate throughout another part of the year. So the similarities, it's easy to see how these bears may have had a common ancestor some time ago. The differences are that black bears tend to be shyer, more easily spooked, and when you see them, they tend to be moving away from you, compared to the brown bears at Katmai, which just maybe look at you but then continue on doing exactly what they were doing before they saw you. Black bears typically only spend like one summer and one denning period with their mothers, whereas the brown bears at Katmai typically spend 2 summers and 2 denning periods with mom, not including the one that where they're born. They both get born, in January and February, so there's so many similarities, and I feel so when I left. David and I were talking about how it'd be fun to do one where we sort of scored them like a competition between black bears and brown bears, because you could say stuff like brown bears win because they're stronger, their bite strength is this, and you could say, well, black bears win because they're able to manipulate this bird feeder more adeptly, and then David would say, well, brown bears would just crush it. And I think it's there's no one bear. No, they didn't ask this, but the one bear is not better than the other. But it is interesting to sort of tabulate them side by side, and maybe we do need to try to do a chat where we really talk about that. But I am definitely running out of time right now, so I won't be able to get into the details with that. Why are bears important to the ecosystem? In many places, they are a top predator because there aren't larger predators around. Like you think about up in the polar bears up in the Arctic, that there's nothing else out there on the land that anything fears other than the polar bear. They're certainly not fearing the little Arctic fox. So there's that aspect of it. They're important in places like Katmai, in part because of their ability to distribute nutrients throughout the ecosystem. We've done chats at Katmai where we talked about how the salmon bring nitrogen from the Pacific Ocean into these nitrogen poor environments, and so the rivers have this corridor of very healthy, lush vegetation next to them in many cases, because they receive this flush of nutrients from the salmon, and in particular the nitrogen is something that can be traced. But the nutrients as a whole come in from the ocean, get deposited as the salmon decay along the riverbanks. Well, bears will take that, they'll take the fish over here and eat it and drop the scraps, and then they'll maybe take a poo over there too. So there are ways like that they distribute the the nutrients throughout the ecosystem. But beyond all of the science-y side of it, for me, it's this majestic, wild symbol, and it makes your experience in nature, I think, all that richer, because there is this incredible beast out there that is relatively unchanged by modern man, and we want it that way. We don't want to get in and affect their behavior too much. It's just a spectacular thing to encounter a black bear or a brown bear, and I'm sure a polar bear, which I've never seen in the wild. And so for me, there's that aspect of it, that they belong there. They make it a better place. They make the world a better place by existing. And they poop over here. They take a fish over there. There are things like that they do, but it's that wildness factor that I think I appreciate the most in them. Do I think there's a positive long-term perspective for bears? It seems that they're under constant threat from humans, and yeah, they are. We keep expanding into their range, or increasing our numbers into their range. We like many of the same areas that they do. I do think that there's good long-term prognosis for bears, but it's gonna be up to us to make it happen. We can't expect the bears to continue to accommodate us and our misbehavior in bear country. We really need to be I don't know if you can hear that, probably can't because these cancel it out, but a flock of geese just flew overhead. And no pooping, that's good. The long-term prognosis is up to us. We have to be the ones that learn how to behave correctly in bear country, and we can't expect them to adjust to us. So I think that's I try to be positive on such things, and it can be hard sometimes because you hear of terrible things happening, and with loss of habitat and bad interactions between bears and humans. But I think you see it in some communities around the country where they do have regulations and people do behave properly. So I think there's definitely hope. I am very close to the end. I know I skipped over one before. Let me make sure I can answer that one. Favorite Brooks moment. There's a tree question I don't want to miss. Is there a defined reason why brown bears keep their cubs with them a year longer than black bears? I'm sure it makes sense to the bears, but I'm sorry, but I don't know if anybody has looked into that and determined why they stay longer. Are the bears protected from hunters at Shenandoah National Park? Yes, they are. There is no hunting allowed in Shenandoah National Park. Now, there is hunting around Shenandoah National Park, and I don't know the numbers of bears that are killed during the bear hunt, but it does not appear to be affecting the numbers of bears in Shenandoah. Our numbers are still very high, and people still hunt bears outside of the park, but not in the park. And in case somebody was thinking of a follow-on question, like how about poaching, we appear to have relatively low numbers of poaching of deer or bear or any animals in the park that we know of. Now, as is the case with national parks, there's a lot that goes on that we don't know of, because you should have the ability to go into a national park and not run into a park ranger every 10 feet everywhere in the park. And so we're not out there everywhere all the time, and people that were intent on breaking the rule and poaching, unfortunately they could potentially get away with that in many of our national parks. But we appear to not have much of a poaching issue in Shenandoah. So the tree question, because we are getting very close right now, I want to reread it again. I'm not sure if I'll be able to answer every bit of this, because my educational background was anthropology and geology, not botany. Something squeaking over there. So the question is the mortality rates on the mixed hardwood trees in the Appalachian forests. The American chestnut was once the dominant hardwood in these forests and is now all but extirpated. The same with butternut and American elm due to various fungal diseases. Is any attempt being made to reintroduce these hardwoods back into the forest? So American chestnut was wiped out, mostly wiped out 100 years ago when chestnut blight was introduced accidentally from Asia. And they were a dominant tree in our forests, and they still exist in large numbers in the forests around here. But what happens is the tree grows to be a certain height, and the blight affects it, and it dies back to its roots, and then it'll send up another little scrawny shoot, and it'll die back too. And what they've been trying to do, the American Chestnut Foundation, is they've been trying to find 100% chestnut trees that are more resistant to the blight and breed those and graft those, and then take the more resistant ones of that bunch and breed those and graft those, and try to naturally introduce the same tree back into the wild that has a native resistance to it. That's a slow going process, and they're not there yet. The other tack that they've been taking is they've been trying to use the Chinese chestnut to hybridize with it and introduce some natural, or not well, that chestnut has some natural resistance to the disease, so they've been trying to hybridize it so that we can at least get that chestnut look back. We've had problems in Shenandoah with hemlock being affected by the woolly adelgid, which introduces a disease as well, and we're now dealing with the emerald ash borer, which is devastating our ash trees in the park. So there are lots of these that are going on that are typically from introduced species from other continents, where we find that our native trees don't have the resiliency and the resistance. But in some cases, like the hemlock, we are able to treat the trees with what is it? It's basically a dog wormer, and I can't remember which of the dog wormers it is. I don't think it's ivermectin, but it's one of the wormers that we give our dogs to keep the intestinal parasites out of them. And when injected into the tree or introduced into the soil around the tree draws it up into its system, and then when the insect bites the hemlock, it is killed by the wormer. And we can't use it on trees that flower because of the concern of bees that might go get nectar from the trees and then be poisoned and killed by the wormer. So we can only use it on non-flowering trees like the hemlock. So there's lots of stuff like that going on, and that would be one of the things that in a future chat, maybe not over the winter, but maybe in the spring, that we'll talk to the park's botanist and the folks that are going out in Shenandoah treating thousands of trees a year against some of these pests and what could possibly be done. So that's something that, if you're interested in, make sure you follow us on Facebook, and when we decide to do a chat like that, that'd be a really good question to bring up and ask at that time. I'm just quickly making sure I didn't miss something here, and if I did, I am so terribly sorry that I missed it. But I felt a little rushed there at the end because I spent so much time early on with my very lengthy answers. But it is 4 o'clock, and typically we did try to keep these chats to about an hour. And so with that in mind, my time is up for today, and I want to thank you all so much for tuning in. I know it's not the Brooks Camp update and bear chats that we typically do here, but hopefully I've piqued your interest, and maybe you'll follow what we're doing in Shenandoah as well as what's going on at Katmai.